All right, I am really excited about this video. I want to talk about the American persimmon today, one of my favorite native trees to work with. You can see some of the fruits here. And I just really love this tree. I mean, for one, I love eating American persimmons. They are super, super tasty. If you've never had one before, I highly recommend trying them. They're super duper sweet. They kind of have like a almost date-like flavor. They can be, you can get them, actually, sometimes you'll be able to get them and they're somewhat dried down, almost like date-like consistency. But oftentimes I'm picking them fresh and they're much juicier, wetter, and they're just super delicious. And they're just a really wonderful tree for so many reasons. Wildlife love them just as much as I do. I mean, all sorts of animals come to eat persimmon fruits. They're just wildlife magnets, these trees. And they're also just very hardy trees. All up and down the East Coast, they're very hardy. They can grow in some really rough conditions. I see where I live in North Carolina, pawpaws are early invaders. Invaders, not the right word, but they're early inhabitants of abandoned fields very often. You can see right here, little abandoned patch and a pawpaw sprouted up. And this was a rather young tree, but making fruit already. And they can be rather long-lived. They can get pretty big. If you're in places like I found this tree in a little wooded patch behind the place where I used to live. It's a rather old tree, really large, and they get this beautiful bark when they get older. They're just beautiful trees. I really love them. So you may have heard that you have to wait until after the first frost to enjoy American persimmons. This is a common fact that's touted around. I find it's actually not true. I eat plenty of very ripe, very juicy, tasty persimmons well before the first frost. I'm not exactly sure where that idea came from originally, but it is true that if you eat an unripe persimmon, you're not going to be super happy. Your mouth will pucker up. It's not very pleasant. But there's an easy way, to avoid eating an unripe persimmon, and that's only eat really soft, squishy fruit that fall to the ground. This is not a fruit that you want to pick off the tree. You want to wait until they're on the ground. If you have a small tree or a branch, you can kind of shake it to get some of the ripe fruit to fall, or just go out picking, after there's been some wind recently. They grow really well from seed. You could see in that last clip a viable, full developed seed compared to a kind of black, shriveled, not fully developed seed. Lots of different ways to get the seeds out of the fruit. What I have, you can just eat the fruit and spit the seeds out. What I'm really liking to do recently, though, is use a food mill like this to grind up the fruit, because you get this nice pulp that comes out of the bottom that's really pleasant to eat. There's no skin, there's no fruit, there's no seeds. It's just really nice, tasty persimmon pulp. And, the other thing you get left with is this, which is basically just seeds and skins, and you can just sow that directly into a garden bed, or you can stratify that in a container over the winter and plant it out in the spring. You can plant them in pots. You can direct seed them in the ground. This right here is a volunteer persimmon that likely got planted there by some animal pooping out persimmon seeds. That's kind of how they get around very often. And they're really easy to grow from seed. I mean, they don't need much. They do prefer to have a stratification to experience some cold wintertime temperatures. You can see some seed and some poop right here that I found recently. Anyway, that's a little bit of an introduction to one of my favorite trees, the American persimmon, a wonderful native to play with, great to snack on, really easy to plant, great wildlife tree. They can hybridize with the Asian persimmons, which is the large persimmons you'll sometimes find in the grocery store. Those are trees that, their genetics come from Asia. They're very related trees, but they're slightly different. The Asian trees are typically, even though they make larger fruit, they're typically smaller trees, actually, compared to the American, which tend to be larger, taller, forest-like trees. There has been some breeding work to select from the wild and also do, intentional breeding projects with American persimmon to find ones, that have slightly larger fruit and slightly fewer seeds and these sorts of things, which is super exciting. And if you're into that, you can buy grafted American persimmon trees, or you can get persimmon scion wood from various sources. At this point in time, I'm not selling grafted persimmon trees or scion wood, but I'd like to hopefully one day maybe get there. But yeah, definitely look into that if you're interested, and I'm happy to talk more about it in future videos. And as I learn more, I'll be planting out some grafted American persimmon trees this year at our nursery site, and so I'm sure I'll be making a video about that at some point. And I do think it's important to note, as with all native food crops, that this breeding work rides on the back of thousands of years of intentional care and relationships between these persimmon trees and the native peoples that would have lived amongst these trees. And I think it's important to acknowledge that is why we have the genetics available to us today that we have, is those relationships, and like I said, those many years of work between humans and persimmon trees on this continent. Anyway, that's a bit about the persimmon. Thanks for stopping by.